Yeah. I mean, we're going to go ahead and get started. So, hey, thanks for joining me today. I really appreciate it. I'm Steve Harper. I'm with Patrick Dayton, my good friend, technical god that I know of all greatness.
I don't know about that.
Yeah, it's true. We've been having some conversations around the COVID-19 situation and sort of what leaders could be doing to leverage this time a little bit more appropriately. But before we dive in, Patrick, thanks for joining me. I appreciate you being here today.
Happy to be here.
Yeah, I'm excited about our conversation because you and I have been having this text conversation back and forth for the better part of a week about how leaders need to be focused on utilizing this time to their advantage. So I want to dig into that a little bit. But before we do, could you maybe give some guidance or direction as to, a little bit of background about what you've done professionally? I know, you're an executive level leadership IT operations kind of guy, but you've had a varying degree of experience throughout your career. So maybe give anybody that's going to see this just a little background.
Yeah, I mean, I've been in the IT space for, geez, I hate to say this out loud, 25 plus years. I started out by accident. I happened to jump into a company where they needed somebody to learn programming to start writing some applications for a cable company I was working for. And so I kind of raised my hand because it was something sounded fun.
Yeah.
Over the course of my career, I learned that I wasn't a great programmer, but I was really good with the project management side of things. Moved into infrastructure, had a few different projects that I was given that allowed me to understand more about IT operations and things like that. So I've worked for insurance companies. I've worked for financial technology companies. I've even done projects in Las Vegas for convention center services, and you name it, I've probably done it in those areas. But, so that's kind of it in a nutshell.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I know your most recent opportunities have been more in the leadership capacity, right? From a
Correct.
technical perspective, IT leadership. So
Right.
tell me a little bit about, I've known you as a technical and kind of tactical problem solver. Have you been able to leverage these, kind of skill sets to, better the environments that you've been around? Because I know you have a very unique way of looking at things, which I think is it's hard to summarize in a resume or on your LinkedIn profile, but you have a really unique way of looking at things that I think a lot of people would be curious to learn about.
Well, it's funny. I come from, I have a sports background. I was a baseball player for a long time. Not professionally or anything, but I was also a musician. I was a drummer for 15 years. I was also really into art. I also loved taking things apart and building things. So I think over the course of my life, I've learned how to look at things from different perspectives. And in a business world, I understand salespeople. I understand marketing people. I understand, general operations people like accounting and so on and so forth. I think those skill sets have helped me to be able to bridge those gaps in what might be silos in individual companies and things like that. The other thing, because of my background in sports, I have a very strong team mentality, and I understand that, there's no one person on the field more important than the other. Some might say they are, but they aren't. And the best coaches have the best players, and it's not because they're necessarily the most technically advanced or anything like that, but they're the people that are encouraged to succeed. They're the people that don't take no for an answer, the people that just really want to do what's best for the company. So I try to surround myself with really smart, motivated people. So I look good by default because they're good.
Yeah.
And then I turn around and I give them credit for what they do because they're the ones that are actually the heroes in the front lines doing the things that they need to. That's probably a bad thing to say at this point in time, but
no, I get it though.
Yeah. But that's the thing, that the more you empower people, the more you give them credit for what they do and allow them to make mistakes and treat them like people, the more they work for you, the more they want to do things for you, the more they understand that there's a common good or a common goal that you're trying to achieve from a technology standpoint. That's kind of how I do it.
Well, and especially in today's world, right? I mean, one of the things that, I think you have a unique view in terms of companies that are doing things right and companies that are maybe not doing it as well, right? But,
Right.
when you look at today's environment where a lot of operations have had to shift their day-to-day approaches, right?
Mhm.
The stand-ups, the seeing each other, having that camaraderie, having the ability to say, hey, you got 5 minutes, can we hammer out something on the whiteboard? Those
Right.
environments have changed a little bit for companies of all sizes, right? So
Sure.
how do you see from your purview, companies that are doing it well? What do you think they're doing really well, and the companies that aren't being able to do it really well, what do you see the mistakes that they're making?
Well, I think the companies that have already embraced a work at home kind of style, your Googles, your Amazons, places like that, Facebook, technology companies that understand that, what we're doing right now, we're having a conversation and we're in two completely different locations.
Yep.
That face to face still exists, and if you have one person with a whiteboard, or you have the technologies or whatever to accomplish what you're trying to do, there's really no difference than when you're in the office, except that you can all eat the same box of donuts or whatever it is that's in the
Right.
conference room. But I think the companies that didn't really embrace or were resistant to work from home policies are the ones that are really struggling, because they don't know how to transition from face to face to video conference or teleconference, whatever it is they're doing. Even though they might have been doing it all along. I mean, I've worked for companies where we have remote employees and we have, all over the world, and we're doing conversations and doing presentations or strategy sessions or whatever. But 2 people are offsite and 10 people are in a conference room. And for some reason that mentally seems to be different than if we were all in a different location. So I think the companies that understand that there really is no difference are the companies that are doing well. And it's a mindset shift in, this is just as good.
Yeah.
You may not have that impromptu water cooler conversation, or you might not have those conversations that happen just out of passing somebody in the hall, but you can get around those. And if you have that thought, you just say, hey, I'm going to jump on a Zoom call, or I'm going to jump on a Teams call, or whatever it is that your company's using.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we have a question right off the bat, which is kind of great. It's from Chris, and he's asking, this is a new work environment that everybody's facing. In your opinion, what do you need to do to be prepared for the next one from a technical team perspective?
Well, I mean, there's so many tools and stuff now that make this a lot easier. Whatever your conferencing system is, your collaboration system is, make sure that you don't have issues in terms of, you don't need to VPN into the office to get access to it, or, whatever the case may be. But just make sure that your on-premise solutions don't hinder you from your cloud solutions or your SaaS solutions, or whatever it is you're trying to do. Make sure there's a clear separation between those two environments, so that if this happens again, you're not having to scramble to go, okay, how do we take this internal program and turn it into an external program? Or, video conferencing isn't the best example, but if you have an accounting system, or you have a CRM, you have something that is older, that's homegrown, or is an on-premise solution, you're going to run into issues from a connectivity standpoint. So just make sure that the tools that your employees need, they have access to, no matter where they are in the world. And if you take that approach, then you shouldn't have an issue.
That's great. Chris says, thanks for that. Definitely appreciates it. Michelle actually said, working from home gives her a true appreciation of her technical team in ways that she never imagined. So, I can imagine a lot of folks are really struggling relative to adapting technology wise, ensuring that they've got access to, the important, applications and files that maybe somewhere that they're not. So, what do you, if you had a suggestion relative to kind of to tag on with that comment with what Chris said, does it make sense for technical leadership to plan for another one of these situations, regardless of whether it's another outbreak of the coronavirus or, something down the road? Because my belief, and I've talked to a couple of business leaders, now that we've done it, it's going to be easier to do it again, whatever that might look like in the future. So, would you suggest they put together a more solidified plan, so that if we show up on a Friday expecting to be back there on a Monday, that and that doesn't happen, you've already got the game plan ready to execute on?
Sure. Well, any solid technical leader is going to have a segment within the business continuity plan and a disaster recovery plan that protects the infrastructure. And this should always be part of it anyway. I mean, there's boilerplate segments inside these documents that are for pandemics or disasters or weather-related disasters, whatever the case may be.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that I have discovered that really helps a lot is having a very strong mobile device management platform. We use Jamf at the company I'm at now, which allows us to manage applications and control different aspects of an end user system, as well as having a great way to be able to remote into somebody's system to do work. I'm going to sing praises right now. The guy that is our desktop engineer at the company I'm at now is an absolute rock star. He has been having to deal with a lot of different scenarios. I mean, if you think about it, he's having to deal with not only our products, our laptops and our infrastructure, but he's got to traverse the terrain of, okay, somebody's at home, they've got their own home network with AT&T or Sprint. They can't get on. Is it an issue with us? Is it an issue with them? Or they can't get access to a certain program, or the case may be. So the guys that really understand how to talk to users and walk them through things and build that knowledge base are critical to this type of situation. So you got to make sure that your desktop support engineers are rock solid people.
Yeah, no, that's great advice for sure. Well, Michelle said she'd never come to realize how much she had depended on her technical team. Why do you think technical people get a kind of a knock within the corporate wall? I mean, what? I know you're laughing, but I mean, I actually have to show you this. You're going to recognize this guy, not because he looks a lot like you, but Erlich Bachman from Silicon Valley. I have that on my desk, and a lot of people always comment like, "Oh my God, that's the perfect thing for your desk because you're like a technical, neophyte, right?" So that guy would just own you. Why do you think technical people get such a bad rap?
It's funny. I mean, if you go back in time, and those of us who've been in this industry for a long time, you'll remember that the technical people were pretty socially inept individuals. You stuck them in a hole somewhere and just let them do their thing because you didn't really want them to interact with other people.
Yeah.
They didn't know how.
Yeah.
That's changed dramatically, but you still have, with any other role, especially with help desk or system engineers or whatever, you've got a tremendous amount of pressure on you as a technology person. One mistake and you can bring down the entire company and affect productivity or just, the best intentioned things can cause catastrophic issues. So when you're deep in thought in something, you're trying to solve a problem or whatever, and you constantly have somebody in your ear that's saying, "Hey, this, my printer
is it fixed yet?
Yeah. Or, my any key's missing, stupid stuff like that. You can get somewhat annoyed. And so what you have to do is you have to compartmentalize it and say, okay, these people are just trying to do their job. But you have to hire people that understand that. And you have to you can't just get somebody that's technically competent. Just because they're competent doesn't mean that they're going to be good at their job. So when you're looking for technical staff, you need to make sure that, can they communicate with the layperson? Can they, put their stress aside and not take it out on the person they're dealing with? And I think that's where that stigma comes from, is a lot of people didn't do that for a long time. And I've worked with guys that were, they were just absolute cancers in the conference room or in the office, because no matter what you did or what you tried to do or how you tried to work with them, they just created this negative environment and nobody wanted to deal with them. So you just got to try and avoid that. And if you hire the right people, then the rest of the stuff kind of sorts itself out.
Yeah, absolutely. CJ had actually just said that she worked at a big major company that has 3 letters, so we can probably figure out what that is. And they absolutely all needed to go through some level of customer service training because they didn't realize that they were actually serving the internal customer. And so her question is, do you think that that's an important task for any organization, small or large, to put those folks through some sort of communications training? I know from my experience in dealing with you, in fact, I'll share a quick story and then I'll let you answer that. But when I first met you, I realized how different technical, I mean, you're a technical genius on a lot of levels. You're really smart and you're really, really good at keeping up with what is going on and how different trends. And obviously, in addition to Ripple, I have two software companies, and so that really impressed me because I could pick up the phone and say, "Hey, what about this?" And you'd always have an idea, or if you didn't really know necessarily how to best answer it, you'd say, "Hey, look, let me come back to you. Let me go do some research. Let me think about that." Kind of like what you said, when I'm trying to noodle on a problem,
Sure.
you kind of get into it a little bit. But one of the things that always impressed me about you is that your willingness to actually have the conversation first, to figure out what's going on, tell me, the lay of the land. And I suspect that everybody that works for you or has worked with you in the past has seen that same level of commitment to not only solving the problem, but doing it in a way that really delivers that internal customer service success story.
Well, yeah, it's a concerted effort, and it starts with leadership.
Yep.
You can't hire a bunch of great people and then have the people they're reporting to have that negative attitude towards support or customer success or whatever the
Yep.
case may be. Um, I've gone through some of these kind of mentoring environments with employees where they have that attitude, but then they go to accounting to ask a question about a paycheck, or they go to like when I worked for an insurance company, they were going to underwriting to ask questions about something that they were trying to solve. And I said, how did they respond to you? What were they, negative or irritated or frustrated, or did they take the time to stop and help you?
Mm-hmm.
Well, they took the time to stop and help me. Well, you need to do the same thing.
Yeah.
They have a job to do and they're stopping to take time. So you got to do the same. And so I started being very conscientious about, when I talk to my employees, I said, look, okay, you need to understand that they're trying to get a job done and you're standing between them and getting that job done. And the more effective you are, the better that your communication with them, or the faster they get their problem solved. And I want to have that department where people go, wow, you know what? I've never worked for a company that had an IT staff like this before.
Yeah.
And that's always been a goal of mine. A quick anecdotal story: when I was working for one of the insurance companies, we were building a homegrown policy management system, and I knew we needed to redesign the system because what we were building wasn't working, and I needed to find vendors and technical staff to help me build it. But I didn't know anything about underwriting. So I went to the underwriters and I said, hey, let me sit with you and learn how to underwrite. So I not only learned how the system worked and what they did, but I also learned how to do all the processes by hand. It gave me a great appreciation of what their work life cycle was. And that helped me design a better system for them. And that level of understanding between me and them created this trust where when I came to them and said, hey, I've got a problem I need your help with, they were willing to help. Or when they wanted something and I said, I can't do that for you because of this, this, and this, they accepted that as I wasn't blowing them off, but that I had legitimate reasons for doing it. And so I think those relationships are really, really important in anything you do business-wise.
Absolutely. No, that's well said. Well said. So let me switch gears for a second. I mean, we started this conversation with the subject of evaluating your technical deficiencies, but since we're on people for a second, how do you recommend leaders that might be out there, technical leaders that might be out there, maybe working in a decentralized environment, maybe have gone through a furlough situation, or maybe are have faced a layoff of their team? How do you think that does it make sense for folks to begin to evaluate when we come back and we get back to whatever normal is going to be, right? Whether that's in a week, a month, 2 months, whenever.
Right.
You recommend that technical leaders really start looking at what they have on the bench, and do we have the right people in the right positions? Is this the right time to evaluate those things? And then maybe if changes are necessary, maybe start to make those before we come back to full strength?
Oh, I definitely think so. That's something you should be doing all the time anyway.
Right.
But, yeah, I mean, if you had a staff of 20 people and you had to furlough or lay off half of them, you got 10 people left, and leadership is still expecting you to solve the same technology roadmap that you had before the pandemic, you're going to come in, 50% understaffed. So at that point, part of what you have to do is you have to start looking at that roadmap and start looking at, okay, what can I talk to leadership about maybe we need to push this off to next year. Start talking with your staff and say, okay, I know you were assigned to these projects, or this is what we're going to try and do. Give me your feedback on what you think we should and shouldn't do. I find that when you talk to the smart people in the room and you ask them for their guidance, you get far more than when you tell them what to do.
Yeah.
So I think having those conversations and allowing their voices to be heard on what is a good approach will give you a better understanding of what you go back to leadership with and say, okay, here's where we're going to be deficient. Here's where we're going to be strong. These are the things that we think we can accomplish over the next 6 to 12 months or whatever the case may be. But that's going to be the difficult conversation, because you're not going to be able to accomplish what you thought you were going to for the year.
Well, and that, and that obviously includes, having to have some of those, serious conversations about right people, right fit, going forward. Right. So I had talked to a technical leader last week, actually, that said that they were in the process of reevaluating everything when it came to headcount from their development team, because they realized in the, kind of the unique job market that Austin has, that they had some folks that were maybe not necessarily on board with the same vision and the same mission that they thought they were when they started. And this has given them an opportunity to go back and reevaluate and look at some things. The people that stepped up, raised their hand and said, hey, whatever you need, I'm here. I'm going to do it. You really have had an opportunity to differentiate yourself in this very unique time. Right. And so from a technical, or really any employee perspective, right, becoming that essential worker for that organization is pretty key. But they used it as kind of an opportunity to see who was looking at this as, hey, well, we're going to be out of the office and this is a bit of a vacation. We're not going to have to work nearly as hard or whatever, versus the ones that were, up early, on the calls early, having conversations, figuring out how they can contribute and add value when and where they can, even over and above their actual job responsibility. So it was giving this CEO a little bit of a different perspective about their dev team, about whether they really wanted to use this as an opportunity to start making some player substitutions, to use your baseball analogy, right? See if we can maybe locate some additional free agents, or potentially give some of these rookies a try in the spots that the veterans thought they were secure.
Well, yeah, I mean, to your point, going back to the sports analogy, it's an unwise time for, players to phone it in. To kind of to take it easy, because right now with there's a lot of great companies that went under. And those great companies had great employees. So not only do you have a list of free agents on the bench, you probably got a list of potential all-stars on the bench. They're looking for new teams. And as a leader, you might start looking and saying, hey, you know what? I know this guy. He worked at X company and he's an absolute monster at doing this stuff. And he's got a great work ethic and so on and so forth. If I have a chance to get this guy, I'm going to try and get him. But that could mean that the other guy that, keeps making error after error after error and doesn't really care is going to find himself without a home. Those are decisions you never want to make as a leader of any kind. I mean, my father told me when I was young, my first time having to fire somebody, I was 19 years old. I was running a production assembly line at a computer company, and I had to fire somebody. And I'm sitting there thinking, I get to do this big managerial thing, and I'm all excited about it. And I went home and I told my dad about it before I had to do it. And the look of disappointment on his face was something I'll never forget, because he told me, if you have to fire somebody, it's a failure on you as much as it is on them. And I didn't really understand what he was talking about at first, but he said, you've got a person this person had a substance abuse problem. And she was a great person, but she had a substance abuse problem. And he told me this: you're about to take whatever hope this person has for help away from them. Probably justified, but have you done everything you can to try and help this person? Have you done everything you can to try and protect them against themselves and what they're doing? Because that's your responsibility as a leader. Your job is to cultivate and help your employees grow. And so instead of going into work the next day excited about what I had to do, I regretted it and dreaded the conversation. And of course it was contentious, and she was upset. And at 19 years old, I really didn't have the emotional capacity to understand what I was about to do, but that's always stuck with me. So if I don't fire people very often, and it's not because I'm a sissy, it's because I try to make the right hires, and then I try to make sure that, I've done everything I can to help them in their career before I have to make that decision.
Yeah, no, that's good. That's really good advice. Well, switching gears for a second, and we have a few other questions that came in, but I'll get to those in just a sec. But how should technical leaders be leveraging their time in these unprecedented, environments that they find themselves in?
Well, this kind of goes to the topic that at hand. I think right now, as a technical leader, I can't think of too many people I've ever talked to that are managers or directors or even VPs that don't have, that closet that has a bunch of crap in it from years past, or that doesn't have a laundry list of things that they'd really like to try and solve. Maybe it's upgrading infrastructure or patching and firmware updates, or, hey, I'm going to start looking at that cloud migration strategy, or how am I going to do some housekeeping topics, or not topics, but projects or whatever. And sitting down and having the time to be able to go through that stuff, because you're not having to worry about, okay, what's the next big thing the company's going to be doing? Because most companies are kind of, flatlined right now, not dead, but, they're not really trying to grow. They're just trying to survive. So now's a good opportunity for IT leaders or technology leaders to say, okay, hey, you know what? I've got a bunch of extraneous systems and I got a bunch of extraneous processes that I don't think we're using. Maybe this is a good opportunity for me to drastically reduce my operation budget, or, hey, some of these big projects that we were going to do that were going to be a huge capital outlay, how can I rethink these to maybe say, hey, you know what, instead of spending $100,000 up front, are there, SaaS platforms or cloud environments or something like that, where I can turn that into an OpEx model and defer those costs over a longer period of time? Things like that. I mean, there's a lot you can look at internally. Or, hey, you know what? Tell your guys, we're going to do a security audit. We're going to pick a framework like NIST or PCI or something like that, and we're going to test our environment against one of these frameworks and see how we're doing, and see if there's anything we want to change to improve security or whatever the case may be. So there's a whole laundry list of things you can do.
Yeah, actually, Adam just piped in with a more of a comment than a question, but they've used this time to reevaluate services that they were no longer using. It's been an ideal opportunity. You don't seem to find the time when you're working, in normal operating circumstances, but this has allowed us to actually showcase some of the services that we were paying for that we weren't actually leveraging.
Yeah, I had a senior engineer that worked for me one time, one of the smartest guys I've ever worked with. He made a comment one time that resonated with me. He made the comment, and he didn't come up with it, but he said it. He said, we never seem to have time to do things right, but we always seem to have time to do things over. And if you can take that statement and reverse it and make sure you have the time to do things right, you rarely have to do things over. And that's a challenge for technology leaders, is trying to get the business to understand, I understand you're moving at a certain velocity and there's things you want to get done, but if we don't do this the right way, we're creating a trap for ourselves. And down the road, we're going to have to pay the piper at some point. So let's do it right instead of having to do it over.
Absolutely. Well, as we wrap up, I mean, I guess, maybe asking you, do you have three maybe specific strategies that you might suggest? I mean, I know you kind of just gave one, but do you have three additional that you could maybe put out there for folks that are maybe, leaders of organizations that maybe need to interact with their technical leadership, or technical leaders that are going to see this video, how they could leverage their time a little more efficiently, but strategies they could use to address some of the technical deficiencies that they've got in place, things that you've seen?
I think a big strategy, one that's always worked really well for me, and you can do it in the office or at home, is I always had a weekly cadence with the infrastructure team and the DevOps team and stuff like that, where we sat down and I would go over not the technology objectives, but I would talk about, okay, these are the business objectives that I know about from the sales and marketing team or the C-level or whatever. This is the things we're trying to do over the next 2, 3, 5 years or 1 year, whatever the case may be. Give me ideas, give me thoughts on what you think we could do that would better leverage our existing technology stack, or what we might add to it that can make these objectives a little more of a reality. And it was amazing how engaging people get, especially technology people that are used to being told, hey, go do this, this is your job, go do this, and you're done. When you start asking them for their input, you get a different level of engagement than you would from just dictating what needs to happen. They also understand the company better. Another comment I had somebody say to me one time is, I'm always down in the engine room, making sure the engine's running. I don't know who's driving the ship. I don't know if we're about to hit an iceberg. I don't know how, so it's great to come up above deck and get to see what's going on.
That's great.
Yeah. So I found that to be incredibly helpful. We already talked about the one strategy of you just start reviewing your laundry list of things you want to do, and dig into the closet with the skeletons and say, okay, these are the ugly things we don't want to have to deal with, but now's a great time. I mean, if we need to take down the office network to solve a problem that we haven't been able to because everybody's been there. Now's a great time to do it. If we want to pull out our old firewalls and put in new next-gen firewalls and build those processes up, it's a great time to do it, providing you don't destroy your VPN and access to systems that are in there. But now's a great time to do it. If there's office moves or office contractions and you're used to be on 3 floors and you're going to move to 2, you've got a great opportunity to go in and move things now before people, have to come back and work again. You can get cabling done. You can get, access switches moved. You can get all kinds of stuff. So just things like that really are what I would suggest.
No, those are really good ideas and good strategies. I know will be useful for people that are watching this for sure. Just a couple of 2 last comments and then we'll wrap up. Mac Daddy actually said this was really helpful, really good. So thank you for your expertise, Patrick. That's great. And then we got another comment in from Sally that said that she is kind of similar to what Melissa had said earlier, that she really has come to admire the work that her technical team, her technical staff has had to deal with, because these are really trying times with people in different environments, different coverages for Wi-Fi, trying to get everybody on the same conferencing platform, using the same phone has been a real challenge, and they put in the extra effort and extra work. So you guys are the unsung heroes of the corporate world, and most people don't recognize. So I would have to echo that. I mean, you do an amazing job in every environment that you've been in. But, most importantly, I think the neatest thing about you is you're a fantastic technical leader. And it isn't just the technical expertise that you bring to the table, but it's really, really, it's the value of how you organize and find the right people. I mean, anybody that watched this today will understand and appreciate that for what it is. And that's a rarity in today's world in a lot of capacity. So, I mean, my hat's off to you. And I definitely appreciate you being involved in today's, conference call, or what we're calling it, a video call, I guess, right? The stream. I will get this reposted on LinkedIn. I apologize for whatever the issue was in getting it broadcast there, but this was solid gold, man. I mean, really good stuff. Anybody that's interested in learning more about Patrick and his background, and I'm sure that you'd be open to any conversations with anybody out there that have questions. You've done a couple of unique articles out there for LinkedIn about technical topics. Do you want to just real briefly just share what those are, how to find those?
Yeah, they're on my LinkedIn page.
Okay.
But they really were just in the course of being unemployed about 1.5 years ago and looking for work. I started to realize that there's this blur between what a technology expert is and a technology leader is. And so I felt compelled to write an article that kind of disseminates the difference between the 2 roles. Yeah. And then after that, I had some follow-up questions on what are my top 5 topics that I think from a leadership standpoint leaders should do or try to pursue. And so that was the other article that I wrote, and it talks more about process and culture and leadership style and so on and so forth. So
yeah, I would definitely encourage anybody that's watching this to check out Patrick's profile on LinkedIn and see those 2 articles. Whoever suggested you write those was a brilliant individual.
Full of himself, but definitely.
Yeah, that guy, whatever. So I really do appreciate you making time today. For those of you that are tuning in, just so you know, you can learn more about me and the work that I do at ripplecentral.com. And I'm also on LinkedIn. You can find me at Steve Harper. I think LinkedIn, Steve Harper. But I really appreciate you making time today. This was a fun conversation. It was definitely something I was looking forward to, because I know it's on the top of mind for a lot of companies. And I think the tips and ideas and strategies you provided today, Patrick, were fantastic. And I really appreciate you sharing them with us.
I appreciate the opportunity. It was fun.
All right. Take care.
Take care.
Yeah, that was easy.